Finally, before we get started, we just have a few housekeeping items to make the day more enjoyable for everyone. First, before you leave today, please take a few minutes to complete the survey that's in your gift bag and then drop it off at the registration desk on your way out. It will help us learn more about all of you and also learn how to do an even better job of serving your needs in the future. I also want to make sure that if anyone is in the audience with health concerns, please know that our first break is not until lunch at 12:45. You're of course welcome to leave the auditorium if you need to at any point, but we will be having speakers until then. We also encourage you at different points throughout the day to mingle and introduce yourselves to other attendees that you may not know of. We hope you'll treat this as an opportunity to connect with people both from around the state and from around the country who share your identity or your values. Please know that restrooms are located by the ticket desk and the bookstore. We also ask that you turn off your cell phones or put them on vibrate. If you need to take a call during the conference, we invite you to leave the room and take your call down the hall near the bookstore if possible. Please don't use flash if you're planning on taking pictures. Also, please try to get people's permission before you take or post their photo. There are a few note pages in the back of the conference brochure for those of you who don't have a good note-taking app on your portable device and would like to handwrite your notes. And speaking of devices, if you lose yours, the lost and found will be at the registration table. Finally, we've got just two more things. One is that a bunch of folks from the conference are gathering informally at the Wooden Tap on Sisson Avenue right after the conference, and we invite you to join them if you'd like. And finally, a reminder to everyone that our Facebook and Twitter accounts are live during the conference, and if you feel like participating in the running commentary of the conference, we invite you to do so. One more thing before we get started. Here's the current schedule for the day. You helpfully see where you are right now, if you didn't already know, and that is the thrilling opening remarks. This is the current schedule for the day right now. I hope you're caffeinated up. Thanks for putting me on blast, Jacques. But if you need caffeine, as you know, you can get it out there. I'm certain with our lineup of speakers, the time will fly by. But again, just a reminder that we don't break again until 12:45. Speaking of our exciting speakers, you get to stop hearing me now, and it's time to hear our first speaker of the day. Hemant Mehta is the editor of FriendlyAtheist.com. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Maybe you've seen it a time or two. He also appears on the Atheist Voice channel on YouTube and co-hosts the Friendly Atheist podcast. He spent 7 years as a high school math teacher and was national board certified in his subject. He gained fame by selling his soul on eBay. His book, I Sold My Soul on eBay, is available for purchase today in the Mark Twain bookstore. It contains his observations and critiques on the 9 different churches he visited, along with background on how he became an atheist. He has also published The Young Atheist Survival Guide and The Friendly Atheist, Thoughts on the Role of Religion in Politics and Media. He's come a long way to be with us today, and I invite you to offer an enthusiastic welcome to today's first speaker, Hemant Mehta.
All right. Good morning. It does feel like church here. So I will talk to you all about Jesus today. What I want to talk to you about, I'm not joking, I do want to talk about church today, and here's the reason why. I don't have slides, by the way, so if you want to be on your phones or tweet or post things while I'm talking, I won't be bothered in the least. After teaching high school for 7 years, you get used to that. So I'm totally fine with that. Here's the question I have for all of you. Why do people still go to church? Because they do. I want you to think about that for a second. If you think about how much atheists have done in like the past decade, there have been so many books that have come out. Yes, you have blogs, you have people on YouTube. There are more atheists today than ever before talking about the things a lot of us like to talk about. And yet, there are still a whole bunch of people who go to church every week. Like, we have not gotten to them in a sense. You would think if logic and reason were enough, that would have changed in some meaningful way. And yes, the percentage of people who are not religious by label, that is rising. But a lot of those people still believe in God. So, I mean, we haven't gotten through to everyone. And, if all you had to do is point out all the contradictions in the Bible and that would do it, I mean, that should have worked by now, but it hasn't. So again, the question is, why do people still go to church? And I would argue they're going to church for reasons other than what they say in the sermon and the music and the rituals. Now, how many of you know of or belong to or organize something like the Sunday Assembly? So it's quite a few of you. So the Sunday Assembly is kind of like an atheist version of a church, right? And here's how I've heard it put to me by one of the people who founded it. It's basically saying, this is the analogy that he gave, if you were walking down the street and you felt a stone in your shoe, you wouldn't get rid of the shoe, you would take the rock out of it, and then you would keep walking with the shoe. And that's what they want to do. They want to take like the best elements of church and do those things minus all the God stuff. That's kind of the summary of what I've heard about Sunday Assembly. And it's not just them. I've seen a lot of groups, secular groups, try to do this sort of thing. But my argument is, I don't know that they're taking the best elements of church, because I don't think the best elements of church are things like the sermon or the music or things like that. So I think if we can understand what it is that churches are doing really well, and we find a way to replicate those things, we have a better chance of communicating our message to the people we want to reach. And because we are not always doing these things, it doesn't matter how many Richard Dawkins books come out. It's not going to do us any good unless we can do these things. So here's the first example of what I'm talking about. Churches do a really good job of giving you a sense of purpose. How many of you belonged to a religious community before you became an atheist? Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you know this. Chris mentioned that years ago I visited a whole bunch of Christian churches, and one of the funny things is everyone could see that, there is this shift kind of toward the nuns even like a decade ago. But the editors of the book said, we want you to drive up to Michigan because there's a church there that attracts a lot of teenagers. And that's really unusual. And they said, we want you to figure out what the heck is going on there. Okay, so I drove up to this church, and basically it took place at like a rundown mall. They just kind of emptied out all the food court, and like that was the church. And the whole place there was a little podium in the middle for someone to speak, and it was kind of a theater in the round of sorts. But there were a lot of high schooler age people there. And one of the first things I noticed, by the way, this is the church that was run by a guy named Rob Bell, who's a really popular Christian author. If you meet a young Christian, I promise you they know who he is. One of his assistant pastors gets up on stage that day, holds up a newspaper, and he says, how many of you have read today's front page? Silence, because they don't do newspapers. And he's like, look at the headline on the front page. It said something like 25% of the people living in Grand Rapids, our city, are living below the poverty level. That's horrible. And then he asked the whole crowd, what are we as a church going to do to fix this? And that's a weird question to ask, because that suggests that they think they can do something to fix this. But they did. And you knew that this was a conversation that was going to go on for the next week, more than that. When they meet with their small groups, they're going to discuss this thing. Because as Christians, they felt obligated to address this problem of inequality. No wonder those kids come back every week. How could you not want to be a part of that conversation in your community? So of course they came back. Church was meaningful to them. It gave them that sense of purpose. I've never been to an atheist group that tried to do something at that level. I mean, yeah, we don't always have the infrastructure, but that's an important thing. That's how you build that sort of thing. Everyone wants to feel like they're part of something bigger. They want to feel like they're contributing to a real issue. And if you think about it, this is one of the reasons people keep going back to church. People will join a church run by someone like Mark Driscoll, who is like horrible with the things he says, because they want to feel part of that huge thing. They want to feel part of something bigger. You're important when you go to church. Think about all the things you get to do when you're part of a church. You can go on mission trips and make a difference overseas. You get to volunteer every single week somewhere. You can teach younger kids through Sunday school. You can run a small group. There are so many opportunities for you within a lot of big church environments to make a difference in the lives of other people. How many secular groups do we know that have that breadth of opportunities for you? I don't know that many that have anything close to that. So, of course, people are going to go there. This is also, and it's important to note this is also a reason that a lot of people who attend church continue to attend church even when they stop believing in God. Because we might convince them that God doesn't exist. It doesn't mean they're not going to stop going to church all of a sudden. Because where else do you get that opportunity? So, as atheists, what do we have to do? What do we do to make them feel important? I mean, it's not enough to just say, let's have a weekly meeting. Let's have a monthly meeting. Because that doesn't give you an opportunity to know people and make a difference. How many of you are part of some local organization? Rhetorical question here. If I ask you, why should I come to your meetings? Do you have a good answer to that? If the only answer is you get to meet a whole bunch of other atheists or something, that's not enough of a reason for me to come back every single week. But imagine if your answer is, we make our community a better place. Look at all the things we do to help the people around us. Because as humanists, as atheists, we are inspired to do these things. Now people want to come back. So if your group isn't doing those things, you should be working toward that. You have to be. Why else would people want to be a part of that in the long term? And just on a personal note then, this is not an easy thing to duplicate. Churches are really good at this, and we are not. I'm part of a really cool organization called Foundation Beyond Belief, and one of the things we do is we try to raise money for charities, for causes that are important to us, because as humanists we want to make the world a better place. A few years ago, we actually had a conference in Chicago where you got to hear people talk about how they wanted to fix things. They wanted to fix inequalities in the world. They dropped everything they were doing. They went off and, made a difference. They kind of did like a secular mission trip of sorts. And you hear all these inspirational speeches, and it's amazing. And then last year, we were like, okay, we have all this energy. We have all these people who want to do good. What can we harness them to do? And we decided we would host a conference around another social issue that we felt there was a lot of inequality at play, that we felt there was a lot of critical thinking not happening. So this is a perfect confluence of all the things we say we care about, and we're going to get people here to talk about these issues and deal with it. And we decided the focus would be Black Lives Matter. That's an important cause. And so we pushed that topic. We had speakers lined up, we had the venue lined up, and then we had to cancel it because no one registered for this thing. And now, there are a lot of reasons that happen. There's a lot of things we could have done better on our end. But my point in saying that is just, if we couldn't get enough people excited and energized to come to a conference with that topic, what good are we? What are we doing if we can't get people to be inspired by their humanism to address that topic? That's bad on our part. So that's unfortunate that we couldn't get anything done on that end. Now, and by the way, I realize that just because that got canceled doesn't mean atheists aren't doing anything, but it's just we couldn't get it done on our end as a group. My point there is just, look, churches make you feel like you're part of something important. They make you feel like you're part of something bigger, that you are addressing problems that need to be addressed. So it's really hard to take people away from that when you offer nothing in its place. So we need to think about that thing. Here's the next thing. Churches are really good at offering community. I don't know when all of you became atheists. I became an atheist when I was 14. And at the time, so this is early in high school, I didn't know anyone who was an atheist. This is something I kind of figured out on my own, at least on my end. And I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. So here's what I did. I would wait till my parents were sleeping, and then I could log on to AOL because they weren't using the phone. And even then, it's where do I find other atheists? Let me go to a chat room. And that's the shadiest place to find anybody for anything. But that's the only way I knew to talk to other atheists. And that was it. At least now we have more in-person communities and online communities to talk to. But this is the problem. Look, if I suddenly became a Christian, there would be no shortage of places for me to meet people and get to know people. And what's interesting is even when people leave religion, it's amazing how much they want to find that community. In the past couple of years, I have done so much, I've written so many posts and talked to so many people who left the Mormon religion. And what's amazing is every time I talk to an ex-Mormon, I ask them, like, so what do you, like, read? Who do you listen to talk about, like, your ex-Mormonism? They all tell me the same guy's name. His name is John DeLynn. How many of you have heard of his name? A couple of you. I'm telling you, if you talk to a group of ex-Mormons, every hand would go up. It's unbelievable. Why? Because this guy has his whole shtick is he talks about being an ex-Mormon. The Mormon Church actually excommunicated him because he criticized the church so much, even from within. But they all know this guy. And what's weird then, I've talked to a lot of people who left the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I asked them the same question, like, who do you talk to? Do you do anything about being an ex-JW? Because they all do, because they all kind of have the same past, and you want to connect with people who have that same upbringing of sorts. And I'm like, so who do you talk to? Who do you listen to? They all say the same name. His name is Lloyd Evans. I don't know. How many of you have heard of his name? No, but if you're an ex-Jehovah's Witness, I promise you've heard of his name. But this is an amazing thing that even when they leave a religion that is so, like, closed, tight-knit of sorts, they still want to find a community of people. And there are people willing to bring them together and draw them toward certain issues. John DeLynn, the ex-Mormon guy, recently the Mormon Church changed its policy to become, like, even more anti-gay. They said, like, even if you're the child of gay parents, like, you can't, I hope I'm getting this right, like, you can't be part of the church or officially part of church unless you're willing to denounce your parents and their relationship. And the thing is, John DeLynn found out about that, and he shared that with all of those ex-Mormons, and they all got the word out too, to the point where there were mass exodus. Like, they were organized walkouts from the church, because people who were on the fence were like, all right, fine, you convinced me, I'm out of here. There is a guy who said, I'm a lawyer. He's actually a working lawyer who said, you can't just say, I'm going to leave the church and get out. No, because that's not that easy. They don't make it that easy. You have to fill out paperwork. And if you tell them you want to leave the church, they will find you and try to talk you into staying. He's like, I'm a lawyer. I will take care of the paperwork on your behalf, and I will be the middleman. If the church wants to talk to you, they have to go through me, and, like, I'll be the guy to do that for you. And thousands of people have gone through that guy now. It's amazing how tight-knit and strong that community is, because if you need them to do something, they'll do it. And imagine how you can harness that energy to do other things in the future. If you want to change like a community, that's how you do it. But here's the thing, going back to the church community, when you're even within the church community, think about what that community can do for you, because there is a benefit to having that in-person church versus an online thing. If you lose your job, churches will help you out. They will find you a new job. They will hook you up with someone in the church who might have a lead or something like that. If you're sick, they will totally make you food. They will take care of you. If you have a baby, you will have free babysitters for a long time. I had a baby a few months ago. The only reason I'm here is to get some sleep. But I'm telling you, if I need, I'm lucky that I have a really good family support network at home. But if I didn't, like, I don't know who I would turn to say, hey, can you look after the baby, or can you give me a night off, or whatever it is. But churches have you covered on that end. They have your back. So why would you want to leave that? Even if you stop believing in God, why would you say, yeah, I don't want any of that stuff either? Because if you're telling them get out of the church because you don't believe in this stuff, you're also telling them, even if you don't use the words, that, hey, I need you to say goodbye to your whole social network, the community that props you up, that helps you out whenever, if you lose someone, if someone passes away, they have your back too. Why would they leave that? No one wants to leave that social network. And very few of us have that in the atheist world. I mean, we get excited when people come to our meetings. That doesn't cut it. Meanwhile, I've read stories about how some churches have facial recognition software installed so they know if you didn't come so they can find you. Like those, that's a little crazy. But These communities matter. Face-to-face meetings matter. Like, Reddit atheism is not enough. You want these good, solid communities in person where you can help each other out when that comes. If you don't have that, people are not going to leave their churches to come to your groups, even if they totally agree with you on everything else. Okay, here's the third thing. Church pastors, especially at like the bigger churches, they're really good at telling stories. For some reason, we are not very good at this. As atheists in general, we're not good at telling stories. I mean, I can't stress this enough. If you go to a mega church, an evangelical mega church, and if you haven't, I would seriously encourage you to visit somewhere. I'm sure there's one like 2 feet away from you. Just go listen to one of their sermons one day, because they're really, really good. It's like a free show. It's good. They know how to get across a message. They know which analogies to use, how to keep you awake. They know how to inject humor into a serious topic. I'll give you one example of this. At a church I visited, it just opened up with a table of like random items. And the pastor goes up and he's like, does anyone know what this tool is? Only a handful of people yell out, it's a car jack. Most people didn't know what it was. And he's like, yeah, it's a car jack. How many of you know how to use it? Like if you had a flat tire and you needed to change it, how many of you yourself could use it and change your tire? Not a lot of hands go up. And then he's like, here's a fire extinguisher. If there was a fire in this room right now, how many of you, without reading the instructions, because that's hard to do in a fire, how many of you know how to use this and actually help us out? Not a lot of people know how to do it. Then he's like, this is the Bible. If you don't know how to use this, it's not going to help you. Now let me show you how to use it. I mean, whatever. That was a good analogy. That's really neat. Like, this is not something I hear in the atheist world. I will hear speakers at a lot of conferences tell me why I shouldn't believe in God. They're really good at giving me a list of reasons why the logic of religion doesn't work. But logic and reason are not necessarily heartwarming. They don't, I mean, sorry to get political here. I think there's a reason Hillary Clinton doesn't draw as much buzz as Bernie Sanders, even though I'm sure a lot of people in this room like the candidates. And I think Bernie Sanders does a really good job of sending a message that makes people feel like, yes, we are making a difference. This is a revolution. Hillary Clinton is like, let's make some incremental progress. That's not as effective. Like, we don't do emotion well as atheists. We don't show our vulnerabilities. We're afraid of telling anecdotes because we fear, like, no, anecdotes don't prove anything. The plural of anecdotes isn't fact, so I'm not going to tell you a story because what would that prove to you? But the stories are really compelling. And I've seen this firsthand. So a few years ago on my site, not horribly far from here, raise your hand if you've heard of Jessica Alquist. A lot of people. So long story short, she filed a lawsuit because there was a church-state separation violation taking place at her high school. She won the legal case after a couple of years. And there was a fundraiser. We had a fundraiser on my site. People wanted to chip in like crazy for a college education fund for her. We raised like $50,000, $60,000. It was insane. I mean, amazing. And why? Why would people want to give? Because think about that story. You have a high school girl who pretty much was the lead plaintiff in a case against her high school. There were a lot of people saying some nasty things about her, especially after she won the case. How could you not want to help her? People wanted to help her. I had a guy say, like, I want to write you a big check, but I don't want to go through PayPal. Just tell me where to send the money to and I'll send it. Cool, I'll help you out there. That's an amazing thing. On the other hand, a couple of years ago, the Foundation Beyond Belief group that I mentioned, we had people overseas doing some work. And they said, hey, there's a community here that doesn't have like a bathroom. We want to build a latrine. We want to raise a couple $100 to like build a good outhouse. And they said, can you guys put out feelers? Like, can you raise money for this? And I did that. And we didn't raise the money. A couple $100 for a bathroom we couldn't do. Now, why is that? At least one reason, I think, is because we didn't say, like, here's little Bobby. He has nowhere to take a dump. Help him out. I think that would have been more effective, but we didn't. There was no name attached to it. I've seen the same thing happen with, like, there's someone in the atheist community who raises college scholarships for people who are like the first in their family to go to college. And I think she's also had some trouble raising money for what is an amazing cause. And I think part of it is we don't have a name attached to it. It's so much easier when you know how to tell that compelling story, though. And you guys all know this because you've seen those commercials late at night where they say, we want you to give money to help this pet or this person. They are dying and they need your help. And even if you give money to those people, they will send you the picture. They will send you that person's story. Those are compelling things. As a community, we just don't tell those stories as well. A lawsuit and saying, here's the lawsuit we're fighting against church-state separation, not nearly as compelling as talking about the people filing that lawsuit. And I rarely hear those stories from like anybody. That's an important thing. And even if you look at popular books, like why is Malcolm Gladwell or Freakonomics or whatever, they're really good at telling stories, even if they're talking about data and science or what have you. We need to get better at that. And by the way, I should say, Carl Sagan was really good at that, telling a story. Neil deGrasse Tyson is really good at that. But those are a couple of people. There should be so many more atheists doing things like that. And all of you can do that too. Number 4, thing that church is really good at. Church leaders are good at dying. Let me rephrase that. That doesn't sound right. They're really good at talking about death. And this is super, super important because this is one of the things that everyone has in common. We all have to deal with it at some point or another. And atheists are not good at talking about this. Some of the questions that every thinking person has. Why are we here? What's our purpose? What happens when we die? You all know the church's answers to those questions. And that last one, though, what happens when we die? Religion offers you an answer that is optimistic and hopeful. I don't think it's true, but it is hopeful. And they have a good, powerful answer to it. You don't die. You go to heaven. You get to see your loved ones again. Other religions, you don't die. You get reincarnated. You're whatever. We don't have nearly as compelling a story because we don't want to offer false hope. We offer honesty, but honesty doesn't necessarily make you feel better. So what do we say? What's the meaning of life? Well, you give yourself meaning. Where do we go when we die? We become one with the earth. We go back to where we were before we were born. That's a clever answer, but it doesn't make me feel better. This is a true story. I got a chance to talk to this guy, Bart Campolo, who's a humanist chaplain, works in California, and he said when he talks to students, it's rarely about, and he talks to atheists or people struggling with religion too, he never really talks to them about God. They don't have any questions for him about religion or dealing with being an atheist or whatever. They want to talk about serious issues like how do you deal with death? Because maybe their parents are dying, or maybe their boyfriend or girlfriend is dying. Or, and this is the one that really got to me, he said he's talked to people whose kids had died. Maybe the babies didn't make it very long. And here's the question I would pose to all of you, totally serious question. If you found out that someone's baby had died early, for whatever reason, what would you possibly say to comfort them? Because of course they would want to know, why did this happen? I know what the church would say. There's a bunch of things the church would say. God wanted the baby. The baby's with God now. It's part of God's plan. Those are powerful answers. I don't think they're true, but they are powerful answers. What answer do we have to give them? And think about that for a second, because the first time that was posed to me, I could not think of a good answer to give them. Like, what? This is how nature works? No, but these things happen. I mean, that's not a good answer. Here's what Bart told them, the couple that he talked to who had to deal with this. And he just said, look, these things happen, but let me ask you something. If you could go back in time and not be pregnant, would you do it? And they said, no. Because even if we were with that baby for a couple of hours and the pregnancy itself, we learned so much from that experience. It brought us closer together. The time we spent with the baby, we found a way to love that child more than we've ever loved anyone before. It taught us something that, we will never be able to replicate. Okay, then then yes, this horrible thing happened, but you are better as people, even though you had to go through this trauma. And I'm not doing what he said justice, but man, he had a way to talk about these things in a way I have not heard atheists talk about death. And if we can't talk about the hardest thing you will have to deal with, again, why would people want to care what we have? Why would people care what we have to say about anything? And again, it's much more compelling to offer false hope, I know. But we have to find a way to talk about serious, real issues that everyone has to deal with without necessarily going into that false, let's give you a made-up story. I have not heard Richard Dawkins do that. I've definitely not heard him do that on Twitter. And I'm not saying we can't shy away from tackling those topics. And by the way, we have the ability to talk about these things honestly, even death. I mean, especially death, because we can talk about it in powerful ways. Whether it's think about organ donations and how much of a difference you're making there. Think about, the memories you're leaving behind. Think of how much you could teach people through the things you do. Let me give you another example of this. And again, I'm not taking credit for this, but it's the answer of how do you talk about losing a loved one and helping people cope with a loved one without resorting to a religious answer of, oh, don't worry, they're looking down at you from above. They're still watching over you. There are angels here. How do you talk about how do you cope with, the death of a parent or something? And I saw this answer online. Again, I didn't write it, but I want to read it to you verbatim as I saw it because I thought it was a great answer that had no mention of religion in it. The death of a loved one is like a shipwreck, and you feel like you're drowning. You have no choice but to float. You have no choice but to float, even though you are just surrounded by the wreckage, the remains of this beautiful, amazing ship. You might see a piece of what's left floating by you, and you latch onto it, like a memory or an artifact, or even another person you were connected to by the person you lost. But you just have to float. And then the waves come, and they're huge, and they crash over you, and they show no mercy. And the waves never stop. But eventually, they become less frequent. And when they come, it's still awful. You can't escape them. But between them, you keep floating. You keep breathing. Gets a little better between waves. You still don't know when they're coming, but you find that you can function in the meantime. And eventually, the waves get smaller, and they're more spaced out. And you know when they're going to come. Birthdays, anniversaries, holidays. You can learn to brace yourself for them. They'll never stop coming, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. They're a reminder of that ship. That's beautiful. That doesn't mention heaven at all. I mean, there are aspects in our lives we all dread. The death of a loved one, what will happen to us when we die, even a breakup, the stress of losing a job. Churches know how to deal with all of those things. We never talk about it. Not as a big, giant community anyway. And I mean, these are the things, again, if we can't help people through those hard times, what are we offering them that makes them interested in our message? They don't care if we're right. They don't care if we make logical sense if their life isn't really improved as a result. Okay, I'll end on an optimistic note. Churches are really good at outreach. Undoubtedly, they're good at it. Whenever there is a new technological medium, there are two groups of people who are really good at exploiting it. The people who do porn and churches. I don't know what else those two have in common, but that is it. And here's the thing, religious people have great messengers and a horrible message. You're all sinners unless you believe in this nonsense. You need great salespeople to sell that one. We have a great message and really horrible messengers for the most part. If you don't believe me, just go to YouTube and type in atheist and you'll see what I'm saying. We will mock you to the point that you will never talk to us again. And then we wonder why we're ineffective. But this is true. Chris mentioned earlier that I do this atheist voice channel on YouTube. I want to tell you how that started really quick. There was a guy who taught at a college nearby Chicago where I live who said, I want to make a documentary about young atheists. Can I just softball some questions to you and get you on tape answering some of them. Things like, you're an atheist. How do you deal with morality? What do you do if you're a young atheist and you want to come out to your parents? Can I just ask you those questions and get you on camera answering them? Yeah, fine. So we did that. And unbeknownst to me, he just took he didn't put himself, but he took the questions, he took my answers, and just put the clips on YouTube. Like, whatever, just here's the question. And here's what I didn't know. If I have a question like, should I come out to my parents as an atheist, or how should I do it, or where do atheists get the morality from? I mean, what would all of you do if you had that question? I would go to Google and type that in and see what happens. That's not what high schoolers do. That's not what middle schoolers do. They use YouTube like I use Google. So they'll type those things into YouTube. And it turned out virtually no one was answering those questions on YouTube. So even though there was like no publicity for these clips, not on my end, people started watching them. They found those clips, which is crazy because the people who even tried to answer them, again, there are atheists who do a lot of work on YouTube, but a lot of times they're kind of yelling at the camera. They're mocking religion. It happens. But there are no like straightforward, let's answer some of these questions. And we saw that and we were like, wow, I can't believe those clips took off. Eventually he said, forget whatever documentary I was making. Let's just do more Q&A. And it got to the point where we started having some fun with it, where we were like, here are like 15 things you should not say to an atheist. Like, I'll pray for you. You know what I mean? Things like that. And here's the response I'm thinking. I'll think for you, whatever it is. Here's what I'm thinking when you say these things. We did one that was really fun. I think the Seahawks and like the Eagles were in, or whatever it was. They were in the Super Bowl one year. So we made 2 videos that say, here's the Bible proves the Seahawks are going to win the Super Bowl. And there were Bible passages that refer to great birds doing amazing things. And whatever the other team was doing that, we made them both. And then like, before halftime began, you could tell who was going to win. We uploaded the right one. It's like, oh my God. And then after the game ended, we're like, by the way, here's the other one. Just, you could do whatever you want with the Bible. But the point is, like, here's what surprised me. I have given a lot of talks at a lot of places. And if I ever talk to a crowd where everyone's like my age or older, they know me, if anything, through my website. They read the blog. If I talk to colleges or high school kids, they don't read anything that I write. They only know me from YouTube, which is weird because I spend like 1% of my time doing YouTube stuff and all my time like writing stuff. But YouTube is what they all do. And the same thing is happening right now for podcasts. And I'm sure like in 2 minutes, there'll be something else that I'm not doing that everyone's watching that we don't know about. But here's the thing, whatever the medium is, Christians are really good at getting their messages out there. And granted, yes, there are more of them. So if you go to like iTunes and you type in, what are the best religion podcasts? Yeah, they're dominated by religion because there are more people listening to it. But here's the question, like, whatever the new mode of communication is, we should be there. We should find a way to communicate whatever it is we're doing in whatever medium is offered, whether it's Periscope or Vine or whatever. I don't know who the good Vine atheists are. A lot of you are like, what the hell is Vine? That's a good question. But all of these things that I promise you, like 14-year-olds know exactly what it is because they have celebrities that they follow on it. They have random strangers who make stupid 6-second videos who are amazing to them. Why are we not there? We should find a way to do that. Because whatever it is, we need to figure out what the messages are. We need to go where people are going to look for a message. We can do that. We should do that. And by the way, all of you here, I don't care what age you are, how good you are with technology, it doesn't matter. All of you are spokespeople for atheism, whether you like it or not. People are going to listen. And the biggest question always is, what's the best way how do you get people to listen to this? And you know what the answer to that is? Don't worry about that. Find a way to put the message out there, and you'll be shocked by how many people find it, no matter what it is you're doing. People find this stuff. And by the way, if you do try to communicate your message, try not to push everyone away through it to the point where they're like, oh, I want nothing to do with atheism, because that happens too. So I'm not saying we should copy the church entirely, but there are some things they do objectively well, and I'm jealous because we don't have that in place in our world. But there are things we can do, and we should do. Like, we have the luxury of avoiding all that stuff that they do that we don't like. We can avoid all that, all the lack of transparency, all the BS stories. We don't have to do that. But they do some things really well, and we need to figure out how to do that too. So we should do the best things that churches do. We can do that on our end. But it's not the sermons themselves, and it's not the songs, and it's not the music, it's not the rituals. It's so many other things that we don't talk about. We got to find a way to do that better. So I will leave it at that. Thank you so much. I don't know how much time there is for Q&A, but
let's see if this works. Hello? Oh, there we go. All right. Thank you so much, Hemant. I think we've got about 10 minutes for Q&A. Please remember to keep your questions short and sweet. Well, I'm sure many of us, myself included, would love to hear your life story. And if you want to share your life story, please come find me at lunch. I really mean it. I would be happy to hear it. But if you do start sharing it now, I'm going to have to cut you off and give your time to someone else. So you've been warned. Anyway, I think we've got time now for some questions. So who's excited about asking a question? All right. We're going to pass the mic down. Maybe that's the best way to do it.
Hey there. I'm Maria Green, and I'm the executive director of the UU Humanist Association.
excellent.
And I just wanted to say that was brilliant.
Thanks.
And I apologize to everybody here for the fact that the Unitarian Universalist Association could have been what you're looking for, but it is not now. And I encourage you.
Do you want to say why?
No.
Okay.
So I encourage all of you here who are willing to join me in taking back the local UU congregations to find me. I'll be around. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah.
Just how does infrastructure, buildings, geography, those kinds of things fit into this? Because I think that's another important thing about community. These people, the churches actually have a place.
Yeah.
And, it sort of gets to what the previous person said too. Why didn't we just take the UUs,
So I'm gonna do one thing, which is say you should talk to Chris later about that, because he knows more about the infrastructure building than I do. But I will say this. It's easy to just think they just churches get the stuff handed to them, it seems. Like they just have buildings everywhere and we can't compete with that. But the truth is, for a lot of these churches, when they do their church planting and everything, they're starting at the same place we are, which is to say from nothing. And what do? They find a place where they can meet. That is not hard for us to do, whether it's, even renting a place like this, renting a high school space on the weekend, whatever it is. They find a place to meet. They build that community first. Like to the point where people are coming back regularly, and they get the core group of people who help run the whole system, who are dedicated and reliable. And once they get that going, over time, that builds to the point where you can all of a sudden start investing in an actual building. But I'm telling you, there are a lot of really successful churches, like on paper, successful churches that don't have buildings, that don't have a lot of the things I think that seem like barriers for us. But the one thing they have is they have a way to draw people in so that they're coming back every week. And again, they've done it so well for so long that, man, they can all share best practices with each other. But I'm telling you, if you have good relationships with Christians in your area, you should pull them aside and ask them what they're doing in their church to do their outreach. Because, man, I have nothing to do with the church, but I get so many letters in the mail from local churches saying you should come by this weekend because here's the sermon we're doing, or this is a big Easter series we have going on at our local church. Or I hear about them all the time in local places. They have a way to get out that message, and once you're there, they have a way for you to get connected really quickly. And I'll give you another example. I've seen a lot of atheist events take place where as soon as the event is over, you never see those people again. How do you get those people on some sort of list so that you can reach out to them again? Hey, we're doing this again. We need help with this, so we need you involved in this so you come back. again, it's community building, it's community organizing. They're good at that, and that is not one of the things that's just fixed by money. So I don't necessarily think that's the biggest barrier.
Not fixed by money, though it helps.
Though it helps, yes.
Next question back there.
Hi, my name's Doug Peary.
Hello.
I'm really energized by what you've done here today.
Good.
You're a great evangelist.
Ouch.
Humanist evangelist, that's great. I've been a Unitarian minister and a humanist equivalent for about 40 years, and I'm past president of the Humanists of Connecticut. Are you aware of John H. Dietrich, the father of modern humanism?
What's the name?
John Hassler Dietrich.
I cannot recall that name. I'm sorry.
Well, his works haven't been available for about 80 years, and I have just published 7 volumes of them, and they're online. And if anyone wants to look up Douglas Peary, P-E-A-R-Y, you can find them.
Sweet.
Thank you. We have time for maybe 1 or 2, if they're short, questions. We've got one down here. We've got a mic coming to you, just so others can hear.
Hi, I'm Diane Keefe, and I'm an atheist Quaker. And I just wanted to share a thought that I think real estate is a vestigial burden based on past philanthropy, that the churches were so rich in the past, and actually they're a burden. But in contrast to that, I wanted to ask you about investment in media. Are there organizations within the secular movement that have actually invested in paying people to do professional media for the movement?
Thank you.
That's a good question. Have they invested money into doing doing media stuff? Not as a permanent sort of thing. Like, atheist groups everywhere have done billboards, they have made commercials, they have aired national commercials, like during TV shows at night. But it's one of those, maybe a donor said, I'll be willing to pay if you want to do that. You can get a celebrity to do that. You can get a nice commercial made for that. But it's one of those, it's one-off. It's not something they invest in long-term. The most effective media outreach people I've seen are just people who kind of do it on their own, not through any organization. They're one man, one woman, like wrecking crews. It would be smart to have like the media outreach. But I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know that anyone does it full time. It's kind of like they do a job, and maybe if they're in the news for something, they're media trained and media ready to go on camera, but even they don't necessarily like put out videos or talk about this stuff in any big way. It would be a smart investment because, again, I think that's the sort of thing where your message is going out to a lot more people who you normally don't connect with, and it'll reap rewards for your organization in the future too.
All right, so we've got time for one last burning question. We'll go right here.
Hi, I'm Anita Peters. I'm with Humanists and Freethinkers of Fairfield County. I'm also a humanist celebrant. So, listening to you talk about churches and community, I think what I have observed in our atheist community is that there are very different reasons why people come together. And one of the things that I heard you talk about is opportunities and different opportunities within the community to build community. So it becomes a challenge, really, I think, as you yourself presented different activities that you were trying to do where you thought you would build community and couldn't figure out, like, well, why didn't people come together to do this? And I think that's a big question and is a challenge because it cannot be. I think you have both the social issue of getting people together who are like-minded, and that's why people do come together. Even in a church, they're coming to their Christian church, their specific church, where they identify, whether it may not be with God, but that's where however they grew up. So we have people who come together because they're looking for that community of other secular minded people, and they feel a gap not knowing where to go. But when you try to organize around just social action, I think you fall into a trap, because there are lots of organizations out there that are doing social action, political action. You have to make that social action important within your group.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely a fair point. Yes, they will come in because they want to identify because they identify as humanist, atheists, what have you. That'll get them in the door. And what I was saying, like you suggested, that's not going to keep them there. So you're right. All these things, but again, I'll give you an example. If it's animal rights, civil rights for LGBT people or something, yeah, there are other groups that do those things really well. But when you could say, look, I identify as an atheist, and I want to do those things. I identify as an atheist, and I want to help these other people. You already have that strong, tight-knit thing that says, yes, I'm going to do that activism because of my involvement in this group, and it gives me a vehicle to do it with. That'll keep them there in a way that, like, yeah, I'm for LGBT rights too. But if I go to, like, whatever, a gay pride parade or something, okay, it's there for like a day, and then I'm not doing anything with that. But if I'm part of like some group that is working toward legislation or something like that, that's the sort of thing that'll keep people in that circle much longer, I think. So, I mean, all those people that have those functional long-term groups, I think if you ask them, like, why did it work? Why have you survived? That's kind of the reason. They do things from that base of that label, whatever it is. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our questioners, and please join me in thanking Hemant again.
Thank you.